Hello, this is part of the Separation of Church and State series, part 5, and this one takes a look at secular humanism as a religion. In part 4, when we looked at 4 landmark court decisions, the movement of humanism in the 1930s showed up on the radar screen, and this webinar is to explore that further as a part of this series on separation of church and state. So, secular humanism as a religion. Well, it's interesting to note that from the beginning, humanism is described as a religion. Humanism first manifested itself after the end of World War I. People were convinced that mankind had weathered the greatest evil imaginable, and the future perfecting of humanity was now possible. In 1933, a group of 34 humanists in the United States defined and enunciated the philosophical and religious principles that seemed to them fundamental. They drafted the Humanist Manifesto, and for this time it was a radical document. So from the beginning, one of the early pioneers was Charles Francis Potter, and answering the question that he posed to himself, is humanism a religion? It is both a religion and a philosophy of culture, he said in 1930. Roy Wood Sellers, author of Humanist Manifesto 1, said this: traditional religion is dying, and humanism is the coming new religion. To establish such a religion, that is humanism, is a major necessity of the present. John Dewey said this: here are all the elements for a religious faith that shall not be confined to sect, class, or race. Such faith has always been implicitly the common faith of mankind. He said this in 1934, and this book is still published by Yale today. Humanism was described as a religion as it progressed beyond the 1930s. In 1954, Julian Huxley said this: humanism is the fourth faith and the next great world religion. In the 1970s, Paul Kreutz said this: humanism is a philosophical, religious, and moral point of view. And he said this in Humanist Manifestos 1 and 2. He was the author of Humanist Manifesto 2. In 1991, he went on to say the American Humanist Association still retains its religious exemption despite an erroneous 1990 announcement that its tax status had changed. In any event, AHA continues to emphasize that its counselor program is religious and performs pastoral and ministerial duties. Now, these are all religious terms, and again, he's the leader of this in 1991, saying that humanism is deliberately positioned as a religion. The universities also acknowledge this. Universities that are virtually at the forefront of humanist activities recognize humanism as a religion. And just take a samples. From the Southeast, Auburn; from the Southwest, University of Arizona; from the Midwest, Minnesota; from the Northeast, Harvard, just to name a few, all acknowledge in their regions of the country humanism as a religion. It's worth noting too, the media acknowledge it. In August 2011, Religious Freedom Under Assault by Thomas Kidd. Secular humanism is included as a religious faith in the Pew Study and the USA Today article. The article is mentioning that secular humanism as a religion should not receive preferential treatment. So here again is John Dewey in the quote I used before: here are all the elements for a religious faith, and that such a faith has always been implicitly the common faith of mankind. There's one part of this quote I left out, and this is how he concludes it. It remains to make it, that is humanism, explicit and militant. And so this short webinar on secular humanism as a religion sets up the next step to take a look at how did humanism become explicit and militant. This changes everything. My name's Craig Seibert. Thanks for listening.